Today we're going to ask the question, what if the AI revolution isn't quite what we think it is? Behind the glossy demos, the billion-dollar headlines lies a quieter story, one of hype, hidden cost, and human overconfidence. Are we overestimating AI or underestimating ourselves? Let's cut through the noise and find out. So what we're really asking today, I think, is firstly, are we in a technical bubble with the AI industry in terms of the economy and the market? And is the entire industry built on a little bit of a house of cards?
Yeah, those are both really good points. I think that there are two different perspectives that we need to take into account. The first one is the market itself, what the stock market is doing and what the prices look like. And the other one is how is productivity actually changing in the real world and our day-to-day lives. Before this show, we were talking about the PE ratios of companies like Palantir that are trading at 700 times their revenues. And we know that this is perhaps a sign of a bubbly market. Potentially stocks are being overpriced or maybe priced on a very optimistic stance in the future. And so perhaps we see overconfidence in the market, but it's also true that our productivity on a day-to-day basis is skyrocketing. What's your overview on this?
Yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know what a PE ratio means, it's basically the earnings versus the actual price of the share. And if it's overvalued, it basically means that the company share price is way overvalued to the actual earnings of the company. So it's a sign of a bubble. There's lots of sort of technical indicators flashing here a little bit, and some of the PE ratios in the industry are a little bit, they're not quite the sort of conventional thing that you would normally see because there's so much of this massive investment in things like data centers and huge warehouses just full of video cards, basically, is what they're using to train these AIs. And they're just, the investment in these things is astronomical. It really is. The companies like Meta are spending, the GDP of a small country to train AI. And the question is, who uses Meta AI, right? Like, nobody uses Meta AI. It's way worse. It's kind of trailing behind the OpenAI innovations. It does everything like less well than they do. And there's an argument to be said that, like, okay, companies like Apple tried to make their own AI. They kind of failed at it. All that investment was pointless for them. They instead have been sort of bidding on who to incorporate into the next iPhone, right? They're maybe going with Gemini now, apparently, which is a bit of a surprise because it's their biggest rival, whereas OpenAI was kind of touted as the AI that was going to be in the next iPhone. It's a bit of an interesting behind the scenes story there, I expect. But, what I'm saying is that like a lot of this investment and capital and money is probably going down the toilet in a bit of an arms race.
Yeah, especially for the large stock listed companies, there are three strategies you can use for AI. You're either the AI developer, which is what Google, Meta, OpenAI, which is mostly owned by Microsoft, and NVIDIA are doing. You can either be like Apple, just waiting for someone else for the technology to be cheap and, just buy whoever the winner is, or you can just be like Amazon, where you integrate all the AI you possibly can and you cut all your costs across the board. We saw that Amazon just released over 14,000 employees this week. And
Yeah,
I think that the
really
statement of
leaning
the
into it.
CEO, yeah, they were talking about, being lean and flexible and staying agile as the company grows their revenue. But what we actually think it might have happened is that the robots are just more efficient than humans, especially at physical jobs, even at data analysis jobs. And the biggest expense for some of these companies is their headcount. When you need to pay the salaries of hundreds of thousands of people, that's your biggest expense.
Yeah. Like Apple and Amazon are examples of how undeniably AI is a useful thing to have. It's not just a complete fantasy where it's not going to be used for anything. Like the dot-com bubble, famously, websites that were just completely useless and nothing, and just silly domain names were selling for like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it was just a complete bubble based on no value at all. Whereas this, at least, it has value. The question really is if we're just overvaluing everything so massively because of the cost to produce these things. And then, everybody's talking about there being like a huge stock market crash, a massive correction soon because the entire S&P 500, the culmination of the top 500 companies in America is basically propped up by AI. Like if you take AI out of the equation, America is essentially in a recession, but
Yeah.
with AI, it's the best economy we've ever seen. It's reaching all-time highs. Everything's doing great. But a lot of the money in this system is circular. OpenAI gives the money to this company, gives the money to this company, gives the money to this company, it ends up back at OpenAI, and the money's just going round and round and round and round. So, you know, with the idea of Apple and Amazon, Amazon is a great example of a company that, it innovates, but it also kind of turns into maybe the worst. It's on a declining quality sort of trajectory, right? Like Amazon used to be a marketplace full of really cool stuff, and you were pretty sure it was going to be decent quality. Because of the way they operate and they've like outsourced all of their products to sort of individuals, it's become basically just a drop shipping marketplace. You're essentially buying off Temu for double the price and no guarantee of anything. And that's how they operate, and they make a lot of money by doing that. And I bet they're going to automate all of the delivery. They're going to automate that with drones and self-driving everything, and that's great, right? Because it's cheap and it works for them as a business model, but it's definitely not good quality. So I wonder if they've replaced 14,000 employees with AI, are they going to be that great? Probably don't think they are, but they're going to be cheaper and they're going to be innovative, and it's an interesting thing to do, but it's definitely not the highest
I,
quality way to do things.
yeah, I think Amazon is probably the one of the Mag 7 that has the biggest fork on the road because, as you say, we all know them for their, websites and drop shipping business. But I believe that 60% of their profits actually comes from AWS, so Amazon Web Services. And so the question is, are they gonna shift their focus from physical products to just the cloud, becoming the main cloud provider on the planet? Or, where's the AI revolution pushing us towards? I wonder if there is even, there's gonna be more space for software as a source of revenue for companies such as, the Mac 7, or if physical products are even worth discussing anymore. I don't know.
It's a really interesting idea for the market, right? Because what we're basically seeing is like everything being like mass produced, imported, and really low quality with physical products. And then everything software being AI generated. You know, if Amazon's main sort of product is this cloud compute, if everybody's just selling compute to each other,
Hmm.
you have to actually have like something nice and productive and useful at the end of it, right? You can't just sell compute till the end of the time. You know, I don't know. I think I can see how, humanoid robots and all this like software production and everything is great. You know, if we talk about like actual products that have come out of this, you can see sort of self-driving cars, and you've got the new OpenAI browser, which is an agentic browser and it can actually do tasks for you. That's productive. That's pretty cool. It's pretty great at coding these days. But these companies that are getting all this huge investment and for very little kind of effort, really, sometimes seem to me to really just be sort of open AI wrappers. Like they would literally just take ChatGPT and use it to create a workout product or a, you know, recipe making product or a language teaching product. And it's really just a wrapper for ChatGPT. How many
Yeah,
different times can you sell ChatGPT to somebody?
no, I think you're perfectly right. And, sometimes I wonder, is there a comparison between ChatGPT and the internet? Everything is on the internet, and the internet became free. We don't need to pay to use the internet. Everybody has access to it. If Tim Berners-Lee had maintained ownership of the internet, maybe we would need to pay to do, every time we click a button, we would need to pay 1p or something. And so I wonder, is ChatGPT going to become free? Which I don't think it's the case, because obviously they have raised so much money and they have so many investors that they need to
Well,
justify all this capital. They need to make a profit at this stage. And so the question becomes, why are they allowing all these companies to so freely access their API and create so many products?
So this is how
The
they mainly make money right now, right? Because they don't make much money out of ChatGPT subscriptions. They make most of it from the API calls because that will cost things like 5p a a call, like, a couple of fractions of a penny per token. But when you end up with like huge amounts of tokens and a prompt, anything with a chat history, the chat is not actually a continuous consciousness as you chat. What it's doing is every time you ask a question, it's like reading all of the previous answers and trying to guess what it was thinking beforehand as a completely new entity, a bit
Mhm.
like a Mr. Meeseeks or something. And it will like just all of those tokens need to be so every time you ask a new question, you're sort of like exponentially increasing the tokens that you ask of the AI. So this is how they make their money. All of these companies that have a little chat bot in the corner, you try and buy a car, there's a little chat bot in the corner talking to you. All of those cost a little bit of money to the website, and that's how they make most of it. But the giant elephant in the room is that OpenAI is not profitable. It's losing billions, and they're going
Mhm.
to IPO next year or the year
Yeah,
after, apparently. So the initial public offering, they're going public. The
2026. Yeah.
shares will be available to buy on your favorite trading app, and who
Mhm.
knows what's going to happen there if you've got an unprofitable company that's propping up basically the entire
Mhm.
American and global economy. Is this a recipe for disaster?
Yeah, I mean, even there, again, I can see three possible things. Option number one is, yes, they're not profitable, but they have so many clients. That's exactly where Uber was before and where other companies have been in the past, especially internet companies. Once you have the users, you just need to figure out a way to monetize them. That's what Google does. Google is free, but we get so many ads on it. Facebook is free. We get so many ads. So ChatGPT can find a way. And they've already done deal with PayPal's, and now they're partnering up with Google so that we can get ads or suggestions for products to buy on in their answers. So they could go down that road. The second option is that they take over all the businesses that are now running their APIs. If, as you say, there is companies that is offering personalized workouts or personalized diets or anything like this, what prevents ChatGPT from identifying the 20 niches that are the most profitable and literally just like stealing the product? And then once you have, you own the software, in this case, you own the AI, you have access to billions of customers. You can easily take this market over from another company. The third option, which I see where you're going with that, is probably the most similar to yours, is a company is losing money. I believe their revenue over the year was projected to be $13 billion, and they want to IPO at 1 trillion, which is almost 100. Is that 100 times? So 100 times the revenue. And if they do lose money, I mean, the reason why they also want to IPO, in my opinion, is that the investors want some money back. And what's the easiest way to get money as an investor? Is you just sell it to the public market and you hope that the price 100x in a few months. And that's probably what they're also trying to do. So,
I mean, one interesting thing, firstly, in my opinion, is, they just released ChatGPT 5
mhm.
and they kind of advertised it as this big breakthrough. It's going to be better at everything. I find it completely unusable, basically. It's really good at coding, but it's so bad at everything else. And it's a cost saving thing because it's an efficiency based system. So it's a lot cheaper to run GPT-5 than it is GPT-4.
Mhm.
That's why they've restricted GPT and the older models to the paid subscriptions, try and recoup some of the cost. So this leads me to the question of, how do we overcome this kind of like physical bottleneck?
Yeah.
How big can you make these data centers? How much money can you put into them? How much, energy do we need to pump into these AIs? Do we get a great return on that? Like, surely it's going to plateau into a diminishing returns type system, right? Can we even make enough power to train like a model that's twice as good as GPT-4? Maybe 10% better than GPT-4. They made GPT-4 and it was pretty good, but it was double the cost.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds a little bit like the Klondike gold rush. Everybody is running to Alaska to get gold, and the only people that make money were the people selling the tools to dig. And
Yep.
so Nvidia is obviously going to be the most profitable company because they are the only ones selling chips to, AMD and OpenAI and, CoreWeave and Microsoft, etc. There is an extremely high level of conviction from OpenAI that they can turn this into a profitable business. And I'm not sure that they will be able. I mean, most companies will be in this race where the winner takes most, right? That's what everybody's agreeing on. We're not going to have 10 different AI foundation models, and there is way more than that. And only the best will survive, and everybody else will just lose or all of their investments, or they'll have to be acquired by larger companies. I don't know which one of these companies is going to stand.
But some people say as well that ChatGPT spends way more than everybody else to be the sort of industry leader. So because they're coming out with a lot of this stuff first and everybody else comes out a few months later, they're kind of waiting for OpenAI to kind of lead the way. OpenAI is overspending massively on this stuff to maintain its lead, basically, because Google could overtake them, but they choose not to. Or maybe OpenAI really, really tries not to let them at the same time. So, you know, they are spending more than they maybe need to. It's a bit of a space race at the moment. You've got things like China's DeepSeek, which was allegedly trained on, a tiny fraction of the cost, and in a lot of ways is much better. And that's the other thing. These models are all kind of trained with individual personalities almost. An LLM, a large language model, is essentially you've built up a matrix of understanding inside a system that's essentially just trying to predict the next word in a sequence. We all know kind of the very basics of how AI works, but it's basically just trying to predict what it thinks is the answer to a question. And it boils everything down to numbers. It doesn't really know what it's saying. It has no understanding of words. It's been fed a bunch of numbers and it puts a bunch of numbers back out that it thinks is the correct sequence. And it's pretty good at that. And it's really amazing that we can do that with language. But just inherently trying to use a language-based model to do things like science and maths and complicated job work, trying to use a language-based trained system to do things like advanced math and science is just not sensible and it will never work. And you really have to go back to the basics and retrain systems. So, for example, if you wanted to use one in science, you would have to sort of train it on lots of protocols, lots of papers, lots of results, lots of experiments, very, very detailed experimental plans and setups and things. And if you did that, you could conceivably make an AI that was pretty good at scientific work. But you cannot use ChatGPT for it because it can pretend to be good at science. But when you really dig down, it fails. I think you're going to have to build. I don't know actually if OpenAI sort of sells or offers a service where it will train an AI model on that sort of thing. Like you can give it the resources, and OpenAI will give you back an AI model that can do that sort of thing for you. If that is a service that they offer, I think that's way more likely to be the future of a lot of work industries because I could see that being a scientist. You could have a scientist that was an AI if it was trained in that way. But if you have these AI systems based on word association, essentially, it's never going to be a world-class scientist. It's never. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, they're clearly using them for programming now, but they're using them for sort
Mhm.
of entry-level jobs, right? Could you make an
I think,
expert?
are still being developed might be hundreds of times better. And so I think that if we talk about tools that can actually make scientific discoveries and analyze, develop new disciplines, etc., are being developed now. And so few years from
Hmm.
today, we will be in a complete different situation where, where these tools will be able to do everything.
I guess my sort of little bugbear with this is that you can make a data center the size of Manhattan Island and
Mm.
train an LLM to try and do an Amazon worker's job. Or you could just train a new AI with the proper input and it would need a fraction of the cost to do the proper job with this, right? You can already use these open source sort of machine learning algorithms to do tasks. And yeah, they're not multi-purpose AI, but when you're trying to do a job, do you need a multi-purpose AI? I don't think you do. You just need one that can do a task, which is to take data and organize it, essentially, is what most tasks boil down to, right? So, with a scientific mindset, you could say, right, if you wanted to replace a scientist with an AI, you need something that knows how to make a protocol and understand what you're trying to answer as a question. You need to operate some kind of like physical machine to do the experiment. You
Hmm.
probably need to come up with a hypothesis, or you need to come up with a question in the first place, what you need to answer. So it could be
Hmm.
relatively simple thing. What happens if we tweak this tiny thing? Or it could be a huge thing. It'd be like, wow, what happens if we completely change this cell in this fundamental way and see what happens? Because we have a really deep understanding of the subject, and we
Yeah, that is an
an AI
interesting.
is like a formic engine. It's an engine designed to just find that like optimum answer on the bell curve. And yeah, it can kind of extrapolate, and it looks as if it's thinking. I don't think it is. I think it's just really, really, really good at seeming as if it can think, but it's not. I think we're talking about an AI bubble and whether it's going to pop. And I think it will pop because just as a fundamental reality that the energy you would need to make an AGI would just be so big and so pointless because we can do all of these tasks without AGI. Everything can be done. It's just a little bit more effort. You might just have to train an individual AI to do individual tasks. And I know that it's not easy and it's not as nice as somebody saying, "Oh, I can just use ChatGPT to do my work for me." It's like, okay, you might actually have to do some effort and program a new AI to do, you know, company A needs an AI trained, company B needs an AI trained. Just fundamentally, economically, doesn't that make more sense that they spend a tenth of the cost overall because they're making something that's a bit more bespoke?
I agree with you. I agree with you. If I wanted to just optimize my work and be more effective at the data analysis that I do and the research I do, that's the road I should be going down towards. But at the same time, if I am aware that there is an AGI or a super intelligence that I can develop that is completely going to reshape economics and society, and I believe that that exists because I think that most of the CEOs of these companies believe that that exists. You don't, you don't care about the next 5 years. You care about being the first one to develop that technology.
Yeah. Maybe I'm being a cynic as well. I mean, I have used it for things in science that I've been amazed by, and it's been great. And it's solved a lot of problems for me. I like genuinely already, it's solved a lot of headaches in the lab. So I am being a bit cynical here. I'm just thinking about the bottleneck of, you're right, it probably will become profitable because so many people are using it. They can ultimately tweak their like economic model until they make money. And there's clearly use cases all over the place for this. It's been implemented everywhere. Some better than others, these implementations, but nonetheless, it's added value all over the place. You know, Kids don't say I'm Googling something anymore. They say I'm chat GPTing it to get the information. There's just so much value being generated. It's undeniable that there is value in here. And whether it makes economic sense or not, these companies are investing trillions and trillions into these data centers. So clearly, somebody somewhere believes that there's more value to be made from all of this money. So, you know, if it's true what we mentioned last week on our previous episode about many of the jobs in the world are going to be taken by this technology, there's massive amounts of money that's going into the people who made the technology. So for them, it makes sense. So, in that technical way, maybe it isn't a bubble. Maybe it is, you know, if the value is there, it's not a bubble, right? That's what a bubble means. I mean, a bubble is when the value has been like inflated beyond reasonable amounts, and it's going to crash back down, or it's going to pop. But you know, there is value in here somewhere. Maybe some things will correct, maybe some things will crash, some things won't. Things will go up, things will go down. But ultimately, this is a hugely valuable industry that is not based on wishy-washy fantasy. It is really, really something special, right?
Yeah.
This technology is like a discovery, a bit like nuclear power, or a bit like, I don't know, some. the internet. Think for something that has huge amounts of value to society that was, you know,
Yeah.
a real turning point.
Yeah, this is a real turning point. At the same time, this is the first technology that doesn't need human to run it. This can, to some extent, make decisions that humans couldn't think of. A horse, a machine, a car, humans in the past have always been in charge of making every single meticulous choice and action to make it move. But this is the first time that you can ask for something to be solved and you don't know exactly in which way it will be solved, but you know that you're going to get a pretty good answer on the other side. So
Mm.
when we think about the stock market and whether this is a bubble or not, I think some markets are a bubble. So we are being too optimistic about what actually AI can do in their sectors. Some other markets could be that we're not thinking about them in the right way and will be revolutionized by AI. So I think that maybe over the next 2 years, we'll see companies that, they are in industries where AI is completely underutilized, that they will soar. And we see companies that maybe their AI efforts have already been priced in, and we'll see them either stay flat or maybe even come down a little bit. But I think that if we look at which one are the S&P 500 companies this year, and we look 2 years from today, there could be that a big chunk of these companies have changed.
That's a great point. I think the industry itself is very valuable. The companies themselves may come and go. There might be ones that come and go. And, I kind of focused in a little bit on how I don't maybe see, like, currently at least, one LLM-based company, like, dominating everything. But that's not really what's happening. Companies like Uber and Grab are kind of investing in self-driving cars. That's a type of AI. SoundHound last year went
Mm,
super viral, massively increased, and it went back down a little bit. But it's one of the first sort of AI music companies that was
mhm.
really quite novel. So there are different types of AI. It's not just ChatGPT. There's other stuff happening. It's a lot of these companies like chasing ChatGPT success, but there's quite a lot of interesting stuff you can do with this. And maybe what I said is already happening. There are many companies who are like training bespoke things. Uber is not trying to use ChatGPT to drive its cars. It's making a new AI based on the same technology, right? So these things are happening. They are existing. And the bubble may just kind of refer to I think it probably is a little bit overhyped and probably will correct a bit soon. That seems to be the prevailing thing. Everybody's talking about that at the moment. And I think it's probably true.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that it's a fake value, fake industry. I think it is here to stay. I wonder if people in like the Industrial Revolution were talking about a bubble or talking about like, is
Mhm.
this going to change everything? Were they aware that it was going to change everything or not? Well, these big
Yeah.
fat cats in Wall Street thinking like, hey, it's just a bubble. All these factories. We'll go back to handmade clothes soon. It's all just a fad.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why people are scared, and maybe more scared than the Industrial Revolution, or actually, I don't know. But I feel like in the past, it was very clear that the jobs that have gone would have been replaced by a lot of new jobs. I mean, I don't think we need to do examples, but the car industry obviously replaced all the horse riders. But obviously, we need a lot more people to build the factories and find the components to build the cars, assemble the car, sell the car. There are so many steps that have been added to the process. So even with the growing population, we never had an issue with that. But if we look at it today, even the scale AI engineers that have been bought by Meta for, I think, 50 billions have been fired by Meta less than 6 months after. So, who is actually providing a value that is irreplaceable in this economy? We don't know this yet. There isn't a clear job that everybody has said. Clearly, this job is on the rise because AI needs it. So, I think we
Yeah,
still don't know
true.
exactly what jobs will be valuable in the next
This is
five,
what's
six
really
years.
freaking people out. This is the key, right? And firstly, I don't think Meta is a great barometer of what's a sensible decision because, the whole metaverse thing, that was a stupid idea. And, I think, these Meta glasses that they've clearly invested a lot in, I don't think they're going to take off either. Maybe I'll be wrong. I think Meta has a big history of like making some questionable decisions. But I think what's so scary about the AI revolution or the rise of this, and we're seeing it happen like before our eyes, right? I mean, I remember when ChatGPT was this kind of gimmicky brand new thing in like 2022. That seems like the other day to me. But
Mhm.
you know, I think it's what's so scary is it's gonna be a whole new world, and we don't know exactly what it's gonna look like. Undeniable, there must be some other jobs that come. I'm sure there will be because, the economy will collapse if we don't have jobs because everybody in the real world is a consumer and they need money. I don't believe in this whole narrative of like UBI, like universal basic income. I think that's not a way to structure an economy, right? You need to have human beings producing stuff in some form or being like, if we have implemented this LLM hallucination prone AI all over the place, maybe the jobs will become checking for hallucinations, right? There'll be
Yeah, I
something.
mean,
There will be some kind of job that comes out of this, or a revolution, because at the end of the day, we exist in the real world and AI does not. So there will be some kind of revolution. People need human beings to buy the products, otherwise the whole thing falls apart. And maybe it will all fall apart. Maybe we'll have some kind of terrible global civil war revolution that destroys us all, and we'll all end up being farmers on our nuclear winter contaminated soil or something. But I think the market will actually correct any dangerous oligarchy or, you know, a market where none of the consumers have jobs just makes absolutely zero sense. So there will be some kind of job. I'm sure of it.
yeah, and I agree with you. I don't know where we're going, but if you have a product and you want to monetize it, you need someone that is buying that product. And I don't think that companies are actually creating any economic value by buying each other's shares and buying each other's 100 chips. And, there is no value that has been added to the economy beside their valuations going up. So I think that people will still need a job which will give them the income required to run the economy. But it's not clear where
Absolutely.
this income is coming from.
That's the thing. We can't see it. It's just incredibly difficult to see. If you'd have asked my grandparents if their jobs were going to exist in 50 years, they'd probably say no. And if you asked them what would replace it, they probably wouldn't really know. They'd probably just say computers, some kind of computers, right?
Mhm.
Something did come and replace it. It it did adapt, it did change. And yeah, as you say, fundamentally we are going to need some kind of consumer to buy all this AI produced stuff because unless you can't just have an economy based on graphics cards being sold for trillions to companies round and round and round. Just
Mhm.
maybe that can sustain itself for 20 years and we're going to have some kind of terrible recession for the average Joe while all of the oligarchs live this crazy luxury lifestyle based on the AI bubble. But I don't, it definitely wouldn't last forever. And I don't think it's going to happen because, the forces will correct it.
Let's finish with a biggest fear related to this market's bubble. Do you have any fear related to this market?
I think the biggest fear right now for me is like just a general crash of the stock market because everything's propped up by AI now. All the S&P, the biggest companies, everything is propped up by AI. And if AI falls, everything else falls. Crypto will fall, S&P falls, the whole rest of the market will follow. Virtually everything will crash, and a lot of people could lose their money. It could be like the Great Depression. Stock market crash just generally precipitates everything crashing. And while the industry has value, as we've already talked about, that doesn't stop a horrific crash happening if things get out of control.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I would double down on that. Alternatively, if this isn't an actual bubble, I think that we are at risk of having a strong monopoly of very few companies running everything and potentially buying every other small business and industry. And probably reaching to the same outcome, like a recession, probably driven by the fact that few companies own everything and most people don't
Yeah.
have a job.
Well, you know what's scary about that is that these CEOs of some of these companies, they're not just like business facing professionals a lot of the time. They're political and they have agendas. You know, Elon Musk with his Grokpedia, Sam Altman, sucking up to Trump. Google CEO was at the inauguration. For some reason, the Nvidia CEO was at Trump's state dinner in Windsor. You know, these people were behaving like oligarchs already. It really is like an oligarchy, the type of setup that we used to, uh, you know, talk about Russia as this autocratic, terrible, undemocratic country is now exactly the same setup we have in the West because of AI and tech. So
Mm.
it's a scary situation from that point of view as well, I think.
Yeah.
We really want oligarchs to control, especially when we use these systems for things like talking about our lives and advice and learning about the world, and kids are using it to research history, and you've got Elon Musk's personal opinion being injected into Grok. You've got OpenAI not allowed to talk badly about Trump. You've got, these people's personal biases are being injected into our lives, and we have to be careful about that too. So
So
yeah, bubble.
let's finish on a positive note. What's the smartest move that people can do today?
It came down to this last week when we talked about jobs, didn't it? AI
Mhm.
literacy is important. We don't want to have our brains melted by relying on AI too much, but it's a great tool to have. But stay awake, stay capable, make sure you can do your things yourself, not just relying on AI to do everything for you. It will protect your job, firstly, and it will stop your brain being melted in multiple different ways. That's what I think.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I think that there is nothing better than learning and knowing firsthand what AI can do and not do, rather than just believing in others' opinions and just blindly following assumptions. Use it in your job, see what works and what doesn't, see what are the things that you still need to do that AI can't do by itself, and try to foresee the direction that AI will have in your industry.
To be technical, be very careful with investing in AI at the moment because it is overcooked. It is way overhyped for what it can do currently, and maybe in 10 years it'll be way better, but it is a precarious thing to invest in right now. So, you know, don't try and pick up pennies in front of a freight train, as the classic
Yeah,
saying goes, right?
fantastic. I think this is a wrap. This was another exciting episode about AI bubbles, and I can't wait for the next episode to come up soon.
Keen to keep the AI conversation going, actually. So maybe we can think of some more AI topics, and not to make the complete topic of this podcast, but I think it's a fascinating thing to talk about. So maybe we'll come up with some more topics soon.
Yeah, fantastic. And if people have comments or questions, give us your opinion and we'll read all the comments.
Yeah, keep them coming. All right. See you next time then, Philip. We'll do this again next week.
Great to